Hi everyone, welcome back to the class. And today's lecture is titled Introduction to Sociology of Dalits. And in this class, we will be dealing with an essay, or rather an introductory essay written by Paramjit Judge for a volume titled Towards Sociology of Dalits. And this is again a compilation of articles that appeared in Indian Sociological Bulletin. And this essay provides a very broad overview of the recent scholarship on Dalit studies, and you can consider this as a continuation of the previous class, where we had a rather kind of a broader take on the emergence of Dalit studies, and more importantly that of the central figure and central contributions of Ambedkar. So I hope you remember the previous class where we discussed two of his essays, and we wanted to reaffirm the central position, the most significant position assumed by Ambedkar, not only as a scholar but also as a philosopher, as a political activist, as a political leader, and as an icon of Dalit movement and Dalit identity. So in this class, I am going to take two sessions on this essay because it's a lengthy essay, around a 40-page long essay. So I'm going to divide it into two, and we'll take the first part of this essay in this coming class, and the remaining will be discussed in the next session. So Professor Judge, Paramjit Judge, has titled the essay as Introduction to Sociology of Dalits. Now, the Dalits as the exclusive focus of study and analysis have engaged scholars and social scientists in a committed and concerted manner during the recent decades. So we made some references about how Indian sociology did not cast its focus on Dalits in the beginning. Rather, it was more interested in understanding the structure of Indian Hindu social structure or structure of caste system, and Dalits were kind of mentioned occasionally. The kind of discrimination and exploitation and cruelty faced by Dalits were, of course, discussed. It was elaborated, but there was no attempt to look at this particular category as a special category of people who not only are at the receiving end of a centuries old discriminatory system, but also as a group of people who will have certain unique perspectives to understand Indian society in general, or that of caste or economy or gender in particular. So, but on the contrary, in the last 2 or 3 decades, at least from 1990s, we see a proliferation of Dalit studies. We see a proliferation of Dalit movement, and especially till 1990, 2000, and at least 2010, there was a major Dalit uprising was happening in many parts of the country. And of course, in the last maybe 1 decade, with the rise of Hindu nationalism, what we see is a kind of a different kind of politics, where Hindu nationalism has been able to appropriate quite a lot of Dalit movements or Dalits into the Hindutva narrative, and that might lead to very interesting manifestations in the future. So earlier, they constituted a part of the study of castes and the caste system, because they, just like any other caste, they were discussed and analyzed. However, certain issues within the framework of caste as structural principles as well as ideology attracted considerable attention of the social scientists between 1947 and 1990, such as untouchability, reservation policy, mobility, and politicization of depressed caste. So even while one of the one of the most important features of caste system is its graded inequality, and which translates into certain undue advantages to certain castes who occupy the higher places of caste hierarchy, and conversely extreme form of disadvantageous position and discrimination meted out to people who occupy the lower rungs of this particular caste hierarchy. Okay, so for any scholar of sociology or any scholar of caste system, the people who occupy at the lowest rungs of caste system deserve special category, special attention. So there were attempts to look at them, to look at their, to look at it structurally, to look at it ideologically, and a host of substantive issues like, say, the issues such as untouchability, because untouchability was one of the most highlighted aspects of caste system, especially that of caste discrimination. Okay, Britishers were surprised to see that, Christian missionaries were surprised to see that, and untouchability was brought to the fore by Indian social reformers. So issues of untouchability, then the whole question of reservation starting from colonial and then into post-colonial context. How do we make certain kind of intervention so that this historically disadvantaged groups will have better position and possibility to take part in the developmental process of the country, and then questions of mobility and politicization of depressed class. All these are substantive issues which which attracted attention of sociologists between 1947 and 1990. Research on Dalits gained momentum in the 1990s, and at present it has emerged as a major field of intellectual discourse. So that's a very interesting dynamics. Now, Dalits is not only seen as yet another category of the caste system, but there is a subfield called as Dalit sociology has emerged, and which offers very fascinating theoretical and methodological insights and understanding about the functioning, the ideological and the structural aspects of caste system in India. There are two aspects of the manifestation of the sustained interest in Dalit studies. First, any work on issues such as modernity, social transformation, voting behavior, election studies, nation building, social justice, democracy, human rights, equality and development take direct and indirect cognizance of Dalits in one or the other way around, So if you name any important or substantive issues that affect Indian society or confront Indian society, I think these are the most important topics that come to your mind. And such a large and all-encompassing topic like modernity, then social transformation, including social mobility, how certain castes are able to be mobile upward, while certain castes might stagnant, or certain other castes might go down in the social hierarchy. Questions of voting behavior, then election studies, nation building, social justice, democracy, human rights, equality and development. So these are all important themes in which Dalits appear as a very prominent category. In case no reference is made to the Dalits while addressing the above mentioned issues, the concerned scholar may be criticized for that. Such a situation may not be inevitably be logically necessary, but it has rightly become a normative necessity. Now, this is again a very positive development that Professor Judge argues, that every scholar is now compelled to cast their focus on this particular group and then try to make some comments about how this particular exercise or this particular this particular concern will affect this particular group of people called as Dalits. Whether it is a new educational policy or economic policies or any other kind of state intervention or large-scale social transformation, it has now become imperative that the scholars pay attention to the kind of implications of these policies and transformations on the people who are known as Dalits. It created a great sense of guilt, the normative necessity, in the minds and hearts of a large number of sensitive intellectuals belonging to the non-Dalit caste. At present, it seems inevitable because the kind of dehumanized condition in which Dalits lived for centuries was enough to create such a sense of historical responsibility. So, Professor Judge also makes an observation that a host of non-Dalit scholars, especially from social sciences and more so from sociology, they experience a kind of a sense of a guilt, okay, and the necessity for showing sensitivity, okay, to this particular very important question, because you are when you talk about larger theoretical and empirical issues, it is at most important that you show sensitivity to how these particular transformations will affect some of the categories which have been at the receiving end of this caste system for the past so many centuries. So just like this has emerged as a very ethical question. Okay, you can't really talk about the implication of a particular policy in general. Rather, you need to disaggregate and you need to look at what are the implications of this particular policy to different sections, and more importantly, what are the implications of these things to the vulnerable people. Because it's not only in terms of economic vulnerability, but it also in terms of the cultural and social vulnerability. We are talking about people who have been living in a kind of a extremely disadvantageous situation for past several centuries. So any such kind of policy interventions must show or must demonstrate the kind of necessity that it deserves. The second aspect of keen interest in Dalit studies is a result of many circumstances of both objective and subjective kinds, whose emergence accelerated in a breathtaking pace during the 1990s. So here onwards, he lists out a series of transformations that happened in India from 1990s onwards, both ideological as well as structural. One of the major developments in the early 1990s was the emergence of the Bahujat Samaj Party as the major political force in Uttar Pradesh. The arrival of the BSP in the political center stage was a consequence of a division of the vision of one leader, Kanshiram, who gave the paradigmatic shift to the issues of Dalit empowerment. This was a move away from the social movement approach towards the power of politics at the formal level. Now, the rise of BSP, okay, under the leadership of Kanshiram, and later the rise of Mayawati, because the rise of Mayawati was a very, very interesting thing. It was a very interesting thing. She was a Dalit woman, and she was able to offer an alternative political paradigm to the people, and BSP and others, they emerged as a very important political force. And this was something unprecedented. It was never anticipated, and this really gave a kind of a new thrust to the overall development of Dalit politics in that particular period. And also it is important that we realize that the political fortunes of BSP has dwindled significantly, and the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, has been able to make serious inroads into the vote banks or into the electoral sections and segments of BSP. That's a different story. But in 1990s, this particular phase was characterized with the rise of BSP and the emergence of important leaders like Kanshiram and Mayawati. In addition to the dramatic rise of the BSP, there is a formulation of critical middle class Dalit who have largely benefited from the state policies. A part of the Dalit middle class was comprised by the intellectuals. Creative writers and social scientists initiated new chapters in the history of Dalit study. So this is another point that they observe. A substantial section of Dalits were able to make use of the state policies, especially state policies of reservation and other kind of policies that were aimed to ameliorate their situation. A group of a substantial section of people were able to make use of these policies, and they emerged as a critical mass, and they emerged as Dalit scholars, Dalit writers, Dalit teachers, Dalit professors, and Dalit activists, and they were able to articulate the issues of Dalits in a more sophisticated and in a more louder manner, so that no one can kind of ignore the kind of relevance or the kind of topic that this particular group actually put forward. Finally, the Indian state began to focus its attention on Dalits through the provision of funds and opening new centers such as Ambedkar Center for the Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, which began to conduct studies exclusively on the excluded section of the Indian society, among whom Dalits figured most prominent. Another section was, another important transformation was the kind of government policies, especially aimed at the academic sphere. Ambedkar centers were established in most of the universities, and the UPA government also started a policy of opening up, I think around 30 or 40 centers for the study of social exclusion and inclusive policy in many universities, and the mandate of these centers was to exclusively study the process of social exclusion and then prescribe policies for social inclusion. Okay, and now let me again remind you that that particular policy shift has been altered after the in the last 9 years with the new government in power. the focus on such centers have been kind of shifted away. Dalit studies in an interdisciplinary Dalit studies is an interdisciplinary area of research. We now find anthropologists, sociologists, political scientists, economists, historians, and legal experts working in this area. As a result of the contribution of the experts from various social science disciplines, we are witnessing the evolution of a highly fertile, rich, and contested field of Dalit studies. So now this particular field of Dalit studies has kind of has become kind of very promising now. It has emerged as a very promising and fertile one now. It has emerged as an interdisciplinary area of research. Now we find anthropologists, sociologists, political scientists, economists, historians, and legal experts working on this area. As a result of the contribution of the experts from various social science disciplines, we are witnessing the evolution of a highly fertile, rich, and contested field of Dalit studies. One of the very important transformations is the kind of involvement of economists in the field. There were a series of very important, very high quality literature or scholarly work by people like Sukhdev Thorat or a number of others who looked into the Ashwini Deshpande and a number of others who kind of looked into the economic dimension of discrimination and other things. So it has now kind of emerged as a very important field. Dalit studies acquired a strong and visible normative content in social sciences and powerfully reminded that the time had arrived to think afresh about the issue of value neutrality. Rather than being value neutral or value loaded, the 21st century is essentially the century of value-based social research. Now, this is again, it goes back to a very old debate. What is the fundamental ethical responsibility of a scientist? Should the scientist always vouch by value neutrality? Or should the scientist always go by a kind of a very strict impartiality in every sense? Okay, is that to be seen as an indication of scientific rigor? Okay, so these are much older debate in philosophy of science, in philosophy of social sciences. So one of the very important transformations has happened in the recent period is that no important scientist or no sociologist or no social scientist would say that what they are adopting is a completely value neutral position. Okay, first of all, it is a realization that this is impossible. Okay, no researcher can claim that what they are doing is completely value neutral. Okay, as if they are not influenced or affected by any of the larger kind of social transformation. It is important. Secondly, the realization that it may not be ethical to claim a value neutrality when you are faced with a very, very unequal social structure. Okay, when you see a society which is characterized by extreme form of social exploitation and social discrimination and violence, then claiming neutrality is nothing but taking sides of the oppressive group. It's as simple as that. For example, it is as simple as saying that I don't take a sides between in a patriarchal society. I try to be as neutral, because the moment you say that you are neutral, then you are with patriarchal structures and then ideology. So that is the argument about the 21st century essentially is a century of value-based research. So a value commitment towards a kind of more egalitarian society, a kind of a more equal social, an egalitarian social structure is always put forward. Value-based research is based on the domain assumption that there are gray areas of society that needs to be addressed, because human societies have reached a level of development of institutions and practices where equality, justice, freedom and rights are natural expressions of meaningful life with dignity. So this is a value-based approach. So what is the basis of this value? The argument that human societies have reached a level of development of institutions and practices where equality, justice, freedom and rights are natural expressions of meaningful life with dignity. So every social scientist is now mandated to ask these questions. Okay, how far these questions of equality, justice, freedom and rights are incorporated into this new social forms and social structures. So that commitment to these values, and maybe you can call them as enlightenment values, or that can be different debate into that, but a set of values that uphold these important these important qualities is something that is always getting highlighted. Now, sociology of Dalits. It is important to take cognizance of the fact that whatever approach we may adopt in order to examine the Dalits, the understanding of caste becomes necessary. However, social anthropologists and sociologists who made the study of caste as their lifelong academic and intellectual engagement might not have dwelt upon the issues of Dalits. They largely remained indifferent passers-by when it concerned the Dalits. The consequence of such a mindset led to the understanding of caste through the eyes of Brahmins and Hindu theology. So this is again something that we have discussed in a very substantive manner when we look into the history of sociology in India, starting with the Indological perspective. Scholars like Gurrier and a host of Indology scholars, they exclusively looked at the maybe Gurrier of course is a different person, but Indologists in general looked at the Hindu scriptures basically to understand how Indian society worked. And of course, Indian Hindu scriptures would present you with a upper caste view, and that was seen as the reality of Indian society, and they were not particularly interested in the situation of the Dalits. And in later as well, we know that when you are talking about Srinivas, M.N. Srinivas was criticized for kind of giving only a kind of passing references about Dalits in his book Rampura Village, in his book titled Remembered Village, which is the study of Rampura Village. And Louis Dumont has been criticized extensively for providing a very sophisticated theoretical argument about a Brahminical view of caste. Berman calls it as a Brahminical theory of caste. Almost every sociologist worth the salt has criticized Dumont for presenting a sophisticated version of Brahmanism. So yeah. Now, social anthropology, particularly the British tradition, strongly emphasized ethnography as the best method of collecting data, along which the canons of scientific research were strongly upheld and observed. The canons of value-neutral social science began to influence and shape the Indian social anthropologists who shifted sociology with great ease and also unnoticed. Value neutrality, as it practiced and understood, implicated the ideology-free analysis of social facts. Okay? The ideology-free analysis of social facts. Approaching caste system through Dalits would have involved normative concerns for the most dehumanized and marginalized sections of society. So the whole question is, when you look at caste system, how can you very dispassionately analyze it? Okay, as if the way you describe the upper caste, the way you describe the lower caste, and how can you as a social scientist very dispassionately, very neutrally discuss the situation of these two castes at equal ease? That calls out for a very strong ethical critique, because you need to look deeply into the structures of power, the whole questions of who benefits from this situation, at whose cost. All those questions are important. Now, trained in the Western liberal tradition of equality and freedom, these social anthropologists would have been intellectually compelled to take a position against the appalling conditions of Dalits, which involved moving away from their neutral stance. As a result, they stayed away from giving the major space to the Dalits. So, Professor Judge makes an observation that they should have, because they are all trained in Western liberal tradition of equality and freedom. These scholars either went to abroad and they studied, or they came back to India. So ideally, they should have been really rattled by the life conditions of Dalits, but that did not get kind of reflected. Caste question for the Indian sociologists had remained the crucial issue for the last 8 decades, and understanding of Dalits remained a secondary concern. The life world of caste was ideally presented as dominated by the Brahmins, and when the ethnographic approach to the study of caste struck its root, the diversity of social life and variations of the caste across regions were christened under the expression of field view of caste, without bringing much change in the Brahminic approach to understand it. So, the observation is that when ethnography was used, when participant observation was used, these techniques were used basically to provide a description of the system as it exists, but it did not have any kind of pedagogical potential or ideological commitment to understand and ameliorate the situations of the Dalits. So, the classic case is that of M.N. Srinivas. Okay, M.N. Srinivas's description of Dalits in that book is very minimal. Okay, the reason which he says that he accidentally had to stay in the Brahmin quarter, in the house of a Brahmin. Okay, and then that is and because of that fact, his access to the Dalits got curtailed, whereas his access to the upper caste was heavily facilitated. So this exactly is the problem. This exactly is the problem. Now, the things that seem as very, very natural will have very significant consequences in terms of the output and the ideological baggage that it actually brings up. Before exploring the specificities of Dalit studies, it is important to discuss the way caste has been understood in the sociological imagination. We can make three broad divisions of various elucidations of caste, namely caste as an objective reality, caste as a subjective reality, caste as a unity of subjective and objective reality. So the next couple of slides deal with these concepts. Caste as an objective reality. Okay, objective reality as something that exists outside, which can be verified, which can be looked at, which can be understood. Caste is treated as an observable structure and is largely conceptualized in terms of a set of features which make it comprehensible. Of all such attempts, Gurier's work could be taken as the representative of the most of them. According to him, there exist 6 features of caste. I hope you remember we had a discussion of these 6 features, okay, which are segmental division of society, hierarchy, restriction on feeding and social intercourse, civil and religious disabilities and privileges of different sections, lack of unrestricted choice of occupation, and restrictions on marriage. All these features are empirically observable and in certain ways cover caste and caste system in a comprehensive way. Okay, I am not going into the details. That this particular essay, Features of Caste System by Gurier, is a very, very famous essay. Okay. The objectivity of caste is also takes into consideration various external features of the caste which could be observed as an institutional and institutions and practice. A host of other arrangements like say Jatmani systems and the economic system in which they are entangled. So all these things are seen as kind of very observable, objective reality of caste. Then caste as a subjective reality, subjective is more to do with your experience as an individual. Okay? Objective is out there, which is amenable for anybody and everybody to see, whereas subjective is something related to your subjectivity, your own individual experience. Conceptualizing caste as a subjective reality would imply the varieties and modes of making sense of one's location in the social structure by treating one's individual experience as unique or by relating to the same set of people with whom one shares the common existence. So, subjective understanding of certain thing, especially when you understand you as a member of a particular group who occupy a specific position in the social hierarchy. Okay, and then you try to understand your life and the kind of the world around you through your specific positionality, the kind of a standpoint, and we are going to have very elaborate discussions on standpoint theory from the coming class onwards. We will have extended discussion on Sharmila Rage, we will have detailed discussion on Gopal Guru and Sunta Saruke. So this is basically an argument that your position, your social location offers very specific insight to understand the world around you. Okay, whether you are a man, a woman, a person from lower caste or upper caste, each of these positions is capable of offering you a very unique perspective. Most of the musings on subjective conceptualization of caste are strongly connected with the objective aspects of understanding caste. However, in recent years, an attempt has been made to understand caste as a part of experience. The existence is treated as unique, and thus it has been argued that the experience of being an untouchable is untenable for the non-untouchables. Okay, and we will discuss that in detail, especially their book, The Cracked Mirror. We are going to take up that particular book in detail in the next week. So the argument that for a non-untouchable person or for an upper caste person, it is impossible to understand the experience of an untouchable life, because your life experience offers you very unique and very exclusive experience, exclusive access to certain experience which is not available for others. For example, Gopal Guru questioned social science theoretical practices which seem to be ignoring Dalit experience. There is also a reason for this kind of situation, which according to him could be located in the inability of the non-Dalits to have the experience and articulate the same in theory building. Similarly, he introduced the concept of humiliation to characterize the subjective conditions of Dalits. Guru approaches the concept of in the following manner. Humiliation is almost endemic to social life, that is active basically through asymmetries of interesting set of attitudes, arrogance and obeisance, self-respect and servility, and reverence and repulsion. It continues to survive in different forms depending upon the specific nature of the social context. For example, in the West, it is the attitude of race that is at base of humiliation. In the East, it is the notion of untouchability that foregrounds the form and content of humiliation. So, humiliation is being theorized by Gopal Guru. He argues that this has been a very endemic and entrenched feature of Indian caste system, where an entire section of population are forced to feel humiliation in their everyday life. And this humiliation is heaped on these people by people who claim to be upper caste, and their lower position of this particular caste is reinforced. It is restated through continuous use of humiliation as a tool. Conceptualizing caste as humiliation is an incomplete exercise in the understanding of the subjective aspect. It is important to keep in mind that if untouchability is humiliation to the victim, then it could be a matter of pride for the victimizer. Pride in having a particular caste status is common as the feeling of humiliation for a social location. So, when you abuse somebody by calling out his caste, his lowly caste, okay, an act which is now punishable. Okay, which is now punishable. You are not supposed to use the caste slur. Okay, you can't scold somebody by invoking his lowly position. Now, the person who faced it experienced a sense of humiliation, but the person who hurled this abuse, he or she experiences a sense of of pride. Okay, he experiences a sense of pride. So, the pride in having a particular caste status is as common as the feeling of humiliation for a social location. Caste as a unity of subjective and objective reality. Most of the conceptualizations combine the subjective and objective dimensions of caste, which only certain differences in emphasize. We have considerable number of writings which take cognizance of taxonomy of caste, subcaste, gotras, and deal in great detail about how they exist and work. If we try by treating caste as a system structure which could be objectively examined, then it is important to know how such a hierarchical structure has been maintained. Therefore, caste as a subjective reality does not merely subsume experience and humiliation pride, but the ideological basis on which the entire structure has been legitimized. So, the argument is that these objective and subjective aspects of caste are not mutually exclusive, okay, because one requires the other for its existence. The objective reality of caste is maintained and it is sustained through its ideological or its ideological and its theoretical base, which is perpetuated through the members who participate in humiliation and the members who experience the humiliation. Okay, now and now we are moving to the other section of the essay, which I will engage in the coming class. Okay, we are winding up the class now. Thank you.